The Holy Gospel for the fourth Sunday after the Epiphany comes to us from the Gospel according to St. Matthew, reading from the 5th chapter, beginning with the first verse.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus saw his ministry drawing huge crowds, he climbed a hillside. Those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions. This is what he said. You're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there is more of God and his rule. You're blessed when you feel like you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. You're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. You're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink and the best meal you'll ever eat. You're blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, you'll find yourselves cared for. You're blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and your heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. You're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. You're blessed when your commitment to God provokes persecution. The persecution drives you even deeper into God's kingdom. Not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit you. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort and that they are uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Give it cheer, even. For though they don't like it, I do. All heaven applauds. And know that you are in good company. My prophets and witnesses have always gotten into this kind of trouble. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Grace be unto you and peace from God our Heavenly Father and from our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. When my family and I first arrived in Africa, I was a bit overwhelmed. Not because of the Africa bit, but just because I knew that I was coming for a particular calling, for a particular job. And being the kind of person I am, I had to go down to the school right away. I was called to be a Bible school and seminary professor. And I wanted to see what I was getting into. And so I went right down to the campus where the school was and where the encampment of the students was. I wanted to see it all. I was mortified when I got there. The school was in terrible shape. It was filthy. It was dirty. There were cobwebs on the cobwebs on the cobwebs. It hadn't been cleaned or maintained literally for years, very likely since the previous missionary had left. I was appalled. I knew that all of this stuff needed to be attended to. And I was the one that probably had to do it. But whilst I was up there looking around and being overwhelmed by all this stuff, all of the students heard that the new missionary was there, and they came galloping up the hill to see me and started asking, when are you going to teach? They were hungry for some kind of teaching. They hadn't really been taught for a long time. There were other professors that were there, but they hadn't really done anything. Everything was kind of in a holding pattern until the new missionary got there. They had been given instruction to read things, to study on their own, but you know how that goes. And they were hungry for learning. That had to be attended to, and somehow I knew that I had to get to it. The next day was a Sunday, and we went to church, to the francophone congregation. There were 3 services. There was a full-day service, which is for the Fulani people. Not as big, but pretty big. The Baya service, which was huge because the tribal group that was there was Baya. And then a much smaller community, probably 100, 150 people, of francophone people people who were government officials and others who had come in who spoke other languages, but French was the common language that we all had. When I got there, they were waiting for me, literally, they looked at me. I had never been there before. I walked in the door and they looked at me and said, "Are you going to preach for us today?" And I said, "No." Clearly, they had an expectation that the new missionary who was going to come for the school was also going to take charge of this congregation because they had no pastor. And they wanted somebody to be pastor. And I knew that somehow or other I was going to be involved and that this challenge was going to be something that needed to be attended to, something that I had to deal with. But where do you begin with all of that, all at the same time? Where do you start? How do you begin to do God's work in a place that in every place you go and everything that you look at, so much needs to be done? It's kind of freaked out. I've often wondered too, though, what did Jesus think about being onto this earth? Think about it for a second. Jesus comes onto the earth to take care of proclaiming God's message of love to the world, and think of the world he came into. Surely it must have crossed his mind, where do you begin? Where do you start with all this? Do you start with Roman oppression? Do you start with Jewish persecution? Do you start with the poverty that exists all over the place? Do you start with oppression of women, slavery? Where do you start? The answer to that question is not as clear as you think, because even in the Gospels, we see the beginning of Jesus' ministry depicted differently in all four Gospels. The first historically of the Gospels was the Gospel of Mark. Now, I've come to appreciate this passage a lot because it was the first sermon I preached in Africa, as it turns out, in an Anglophone congregation up north. And apparently I was told I blew it. It was from the Gospel of Mark. And that story is the story where Jesus casts out a demon. He heals a man who is possessed by a demon. I focused in my sermon, I thought it was a pretty decent sermon. I focused on God's power over everything, that there was nothing that could defeat us, nothing that could overwhelm us. And when I was finished, the people said to me, "Not here. Here we need to know that God has power to throw out evil spirits." Because in that culture, evil spirits were absolutely tangible, absolutely real. In our context, not so much. We talk about our challenges and difficulties and bad things that go on, and we talk about God's power over all that. But there, you need to name it. God is more powerful even than evil spirits. Mark begins with Jesus' power over evil. Mark begins saying that Jesus can confront and defeat anything. Jesus is the one who steps over every boundary. Nothing. Gospel of Luke has a story that is kind of every seminarian's worst nightmare. I lived through this even before that, when I was in college studying theology before seminary. And that is this: going back to preach in front of your own family. On the one hand, it's a hugely supportive group of people, but on the other hand, you feel like every single person in the room is judging you because they know you better than anybody else. They know when you've been bad, they know when you've been good, they know everything about your history. And so your preaching is under a microscope that is terrifying. That's what the Gospel of Luke is. Now, those of us who were on the trip to the Holy Land last year will remember the church in Nazareth. You know the little door in the wall that we went inside? Dave had to duck to get in. We went in this little church and looked at the architecture, which probably had been changed over the years, but the idea of this sermon that Jesus preached was terribly challenging because he came in there and he told them the truth. He told them what he was going to do in his ministry. And he told them who his ministry was for. And the people were so upset with him. His family The people whom he lived with, who he grew up with in Nazareth, they were so upset with him that they took him out on a hill just outside of town and were going to pitch him over the top. To speak the truth in one's own home, with one's own family, is not a safe thing to do. And that's where the Gospel of Luke has Jesus' ministry beginning. Gospel of John, it's all about abundance. The first thing that Jesus does in his ministry in the Gospel of John is he turns the water into wine. The miracle of the wedding in Cana, and we too traveled there. We saw the big, huge containers in which the water was kept, and that Jesus turned into wine. A miracle of abundance, of grace upon grace. And we believe that in all of these instances, in Mark and in Luke and in John and in Matthew, in all of these instances, these people want to proclaim something important about who Jesus is. And in John, it's that Jesus is the embodiment of God's love for us, the embodiment of grace, giving us everything that we need. Now we come to the Gospel of Matthew, and the Gospel of Matthew really begins Jesus' ministry with teaching. Jesus is the quintessential teacher of righteousness. And it's called the Sermon on the Mount, with which we began this morning. But it really is teaching. Jesus goes up with his disciples and begins to teach them. Now, where do you begin teaching these people? In the terms of Jesus' ministry, I happen to like Matthew as the beginning of his ministry, because where do you begin? And I believe Jesus probably wanted to begin not so much with all of the little things that needed to be done, the various details, but with the crowd of people who were around them. And he wanted to remind them, he wanted to tell them, he wanted them to know more than anything else this, just this: you are blessed. Beyond measure, beyond your comprehension, and in every single way, brothers and sisters, you are blessed. That's the message that Jesus had for his disciples, the ones who were committed, who were following him, who were immediately most close to him. And it is a message for us. And it is with this message that both Jesus and we can go out into the world to do Jesus' work among God's people everywhere. If we can remember how blessed we are, we can and we should, and we have been asked to do everything. Jesus gives us strength and power to confront the greatest evil in the world. And God knows the world in which we live now, and if Jesus were to come into it now, is fraught with all the same kinds of troubles as before. There is evil everywhere. There is sorrow everywhere. There is despair everywhere. There is corruption everywhere. There are problems everywhere you look. Children are being sold and trafficked. Adults as old as we are using them for personal gratification. Women are being oppressed by men continually, treated as if their opinions and their value is somehow less significant than that of men. Happens even now, even here. There is corruption everywhere you look. And so one would wonder, if Jesus were to walk in the room right now, what would he do? Where would he begin? Where would he start? I believe, brothers and sisters, if Jesus were to walk in the room right now, to begin his ministry right now, he would start with us and say to us, brothers and sisters, you're blessed. You're blessed with all that you have. We're blessed not just in view of the joy that comes with being a part of God's family, but we're blessed with strength and fortitude for the times when things are difficult, when things are challenging. We're blessed. This is Jesus' reminder to you today. As you go out into the world to do the work that he's called you to do, each and every one of you, as you go into that world and face all of the challenges, remember this: you're blessed. You're so blessed. You're blessed because God loves you. And if you have that inside you, if you know that, absolutely know that, without question that you are blessed beyond measure, then the message that you will share with God's children is so powerful. The message that God loves them. We live in a world where people live without hope. We live in a world where people come into our church, in our office, and tell stories of how they've tried to hurt themselves, even been suicidal, because they feel there is no one that loves them. We live in a world where people come into the office who tell stories of how others have tried to hurt them. We live in a world where there are stories of betrayal, where there are stories of anger, where there are stories of hatred. God's answer to all of that, brothers and sisters, is you. Because you're blessed. You're blessed, and you know it, and you know God's love, and you can share it. So as you go out from this place today, remembering how blessed you are, share that message with God's world, with God's children. Share that message with God's children who need to hear it. And you need to know there's a lot. So go out from this place and share God's blessing with the world. Amen.
Amen.
Let us pray. Gracious Lord, we give you thanks this day for the manifold blessings that we can scarcely count. Help us to remember the simple fact that we're blessed. For in remembering, we are strengthened to do the things you have us do, to be the people you have us be. And that is so important because, Lord, we know that we live in a world that lives in despair, in hopelessness, in anguish and anger. Help us to proclaim that word of love, that word of blessing that is for all people. And so doing, we are in your hands and feet, Lord. For all this possibility, for all these things, we give you thanks.